What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another UFC breakdown and predictions video. This time for UFC Vegas 94, Lemos versus Jandiroba. Now, we're coming off of a shit show card last weekend at UFC Denver, and by shit show I mean my picks were awful, but it's all good. We're going to bounce back. UFC Denver was actually quite an entertaining card. And here's going to be another sketchy card at UFC Vegas 94. 4 picks. I think there's some good spots, but most of them are kind of like 50-50 fights. It's not the best card, but we are going to be 1 week away from UFC 304 after this one, so we have that to look forward to. Regardless, some of these picks I was on the fence about, and I made some pick switches during my research. But we're going to go through that. Make sure to hit that like button. Drop a subscription if you are new, and comment down below with your thoughts on this UFC Vegas 94 card. Starting off the night, we got a heavyweight bout. We're getting this out of the way nice and early. We got Muhammad Usman going up against Thomas Petersen. Now, I am going to go with Usman in this fight. Neither of these guys are technically... none of these guys have good technical striking in this matchup. Usman... he's kind of flat-footed, doesn't have much head movement, but he does have the power advantage for sure in this matchup. Thomas Petersen looks to use his striking as a distraction to kind of get his opponents to the mat, and he wants to get them in those positions so that he can work his ground and pound. He will fade throughout the fights though, and we know that Usman can go a full 15 minutes. And that's probably how he gets it done on this card. I think if he has like a Jamal Pogues game plan where he stays on the feet, snaps out that jab, and fights off those takedowns of Thomas Petersen, I think eventually Petersen will fade, and then Usman will take over in this match. Thomas Petersen is going to be live in that first round. Obviously, that's when he does his best work. If he gets those takedowns on Usman, I can see him maybe landing that effective ground and pound as he loves to do. But I am going to trust Usman to fight off those takedowns, be the better striker on the feet, snap out that jab, and honestly, I can see him finding success if he decides to offensively wrestle against Petersen early to take away that danger factor, and then Petersen will slow down in that third round. I think Usman gets this done on the judges' scorecards. I wouldn't be surprised if Petersen gets this done too. It's a heavyweight fight. Neither of these guys are very good. Not to shit on them, but they are kind of bottom of the barrel heavyweights at this point. So let's move on. I'm going with Muhammad Usman to get it done. We got a women's flyweight bout. Actually, it says flyweight. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, this has been moved up to bantamweight. Let me double check that. I should know this before I start recording. But it's too late for that. We are going to go and check. It is actually down to flyweight now. I don't know what's going on, but this was originally a flyweight fight, then it moved to bantamweight, and now it's a flyweight fight again. So I don't know what's happening. Regardless, Luana Carolina is going to be my pick in this matchup. I don't think Pudilova is UFC caliber, and I think Carolina is just better anywhere the fight goes. If it ends up being a striking affair, I think she's going to be the better striker. If this ends up going onto the mat, I think she's going to be the one deciding whether or not this gets there. I think she mixes in that wrestling and finds success down there. She was able to go up against Stoliarenko, who has the dangerous submission skills, and she was able to take her down and beat her up, basically. She TKO'd her in that third round, and I think she's probably going to be able to do that to Pudilova, honestly. An interesting thing that I wanted to mention was that I noticed is that Carolina, I think she has 7 total UFC fights. So she has 8. She's 5-3. So in 2 of those fights, she ended up getting takedowns. And in those fights, she ended up winning. And those were her last 2 fights against Ivana Petrovic and Julia Stoliarenko. So she's kind of added that to her game, and it seems to be successful for her. Now, if you look at the Pudilova side, in 5 of her UFC fights, she's been taken down, and she is 1-4 in those fights. So typically the way to beat Pudilova is to mix in that wrestling. And Carolina has started to add that to her game. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Carolina take Pudilova down and put in some work there, especially seeing Pudilova get dominated by Eileen Perez in her last fight. So I think Carolina's just the better fighter. Anywhere this takes place, she'll be the better fighter on the feet. And I can see her mixing in that wrestling as well. So give me Luana Carolina to get it done. It's hard to call finishes in women's fights, but I'm probably just going to say she gets it done on the judges' scorecards. Next up, we got Loic Radzhabov going up against Trey Ogden. And I'm going to be picking Ogden in this fight for a few reasons. Now, I really like how Ogden game plans for his opponents. He's actually a coach as well, if I'm not mistaken, at his gym. So he has a good MMA mind. He has good fight IQ, and I think he game plans well against his opponents, finds their weakness, and he exploits that when he enters the octagon. He's a master of none. He's not like a superior in any facet of the game, but he has a good overall skill set, and he is a generalist. Now, if you go to Loic Radzhabov, on the Loic Radzhabov side, he is a powerhouse. Everything he does is power-based. When he throws punches, he's throwing heavy, and he has that knockout power. When he's clinching up and getting takedowns, it's all muscle-based, all power, because the dude he's carrying around a lot of muscle. So I don't blame him for doing that. But because he does that, he ends up slowing down as the fight continues, and Ogden won't slow down. He's got good cardio. Now, I think Ogden is going to try to maybe wrestle a little bit early, wear down on Radzhabov, knowing that he has those cardio issues. And Loic's best bet in this fight, in my opinion, is going to be to knock out Trey Ogden. But if you look at Trey Ogden's record, he's never KO'd anybody, and he's never been KO'd either. So it's going to be interesting to see how this fight plays out. This is one of those 50-50 fights. Obviously, Radzhabov can land that one big punch that alters the fight, but I am going to trust Ogden to game plan well for this match. I think he'll wear down Radzhabov early, take out that danger factor of his game, and then kind of ride to a judge win, a decision win, whatever you want to call it. Maybe he can get a submission when Radzhabov is really tired at nearing the end of that fight, but I will go Ogden on the judges' scorecards. I don't think we're going to see a finish for the first few fights of this card, but give me Ogden, get it done. Let's move on to the next fight. We got another women's flyweight bout. Miranda Maverick going up against Dione Barbosa. Now, this is one of those fights that I mentioned in the intro where I was on the fence and kind of switched my pick. Originally, I wanted to go with Miranda Maverick, but I did some research. I kind of deep dived a little bit more, and I am going to go with Dione Barbosa. Reason being is I like Maverick's wrestling. I think she does well getting her opponents down and kind of controlling the fight in that area. And she's just slowly improving. She's been very young throughout her UFC career, and she's now 27 years old. So I think everything's going to slowly start piecing together for her. But this is going to be a tough fight for her. She actually has 9 UFC fights at the age of 27. That's pretty good, regardless. So she's got a lot of UFC experience, way more than Dione Barbosa. But I am going to pick Barbosa. Reason being is I don't think Maverick has that good of striking. And even though Barbosa has a grappling background, I think she did like grappling tournaments and things like that. That was before her MMA career. So even though Barbosa isn't a striker, she does have the better striking than Maverick. We see it in her fights. She uses her range well. She seems like a physically strong girl that will be able to fend off takedowns from Maverick. And even if Maverick does land those takedowns, Barbosa has slick jiu-jitsu to threaten submissions, to get sweeps on Maverick, to maybe get onto top position or just get up to her feet in general. The thing is, I think Maverick is going to have the better cardio in this matchup, so it's going to be interesting to see how Barbosa does later on in the fight. But I think early on, Maverick's going to have trouble dealing with the speed and the striking of Barbosa. I think Barbosa is going to be able to fend off those takedowns early on at least. And like I said, even if the fight does get taken down to the ground, Barbosa has slick jiu-jitsu to threaten Maverick throughout the fight. So I will take Barbosa in this fight. This is another one of those fights where I think it's a 50-50 matchup. I think Maverick is kind of too big of a favorite. I don't know. I haven't seen the odds for a few days, but I will go with Barbosa here to get it done. Let's move on to the next fight. We got Brian Kelleher going up against Cody Gibson. Now I'm going to go with Cody Gibson, and both these guys, Cody Gibson's 36, Brian Kelleher's 37. And even though these guys aren't the top elite fighters, I think what I'm going to base this off of is I think Gibson, when I see him step into the octagon, it seems like he still has that fire to succeed in fighting in his career. But Brian Kelleher seems to me that he just doesn't want to be in there, especially that's the kind of vibe I got against Cody Garbrandt in his last fight back in December of last year. And he is coming off of 3 finish losses in a row, all in the first round. Now, I will say it is against it's against elite competition. Like Cody Garbrandt was his last loss, Mario Bautista before that, and then Umar Nurmagomedov before that, and it was all finishes in the first round. So at this point of Kelleher's career, I just don't think he has that passion. I don't think he has that drive, and I just think Cody Gibson at this point is the better fighter overall. When I see Cody Gibson step into that UFC octagon, I still see somebody that wants to succeed in this fight game. So I will go with Cody Gibson. And yeah, that's basically what I'm going off of in this fight. Let's move on. We got a featherweight bout, Jiang Li going up against Haider Amil. And here's another fight that I switched when I started to do the research. Now, I had my notes, but I'm going to kind of go off of memory here. But Jiang Li impressed me in that fight with Blake Bilder. I thought Blake Bilder was going to find more success wrestling with Jiang Li, but to my surprise, Li was fending off all those takedowns. He had Bilder hurt multiple times in that fight as well. And this may sound funny, but Haider Amil is kind of like a more aggressive version of Blake Bilder. He kind of has a similar style. And one thing I really like about Amil, and one thing you got to look at in fighters when you're making picks, is if they're a dog or not. Amil comes in to scrap every single time. He looks to finish his opponents, which is another good trait when you're picking fighters. You don't want to typically go with a fighter that's okay with point fighting until the fight is over, whether it's 15 or 25 minutes. You want somebody that comes in with the intention to finish his opponent. And Haider Amil definitely does that. The problem is he can be exploited with certain parts of his game. So he can get taken down and controlled. We've seen that in his LFA career. Mind you, he is undefeated, so that is something to keep in mind. But I think Jiang Li is the more skillful fighter. I really liked his performance against Bilder. I think he's going to be able to land on Haider Amil in the striking exchanges. Li is very methodical in that sense, and he will work in that wrestling also, which we've seen Amil struggle with. So I think I am going to pick Li to hand Amil his first loss of his career. And yeah, so that's my breakdown for this fight. Let's move on to the next one. We got Woo Choi going up against Bill Algeo. And here's another one. I was on my immediate thought when I was looking at these matchups, I was going to pick Bill Algeo. But looking at fight tape, I am going to pick Woo Choi. He is a very methodical fighter, and he doesn't really put himself in danger too much, and he can find success anywhere the fight takes place, whether it's on the feet, whether it's in grappling exchanges, the clinch, anything. Woo Choi can find success within that. Now, one thing that I was impressed with was he had to take a break from fighting to do his mandatory military service in South Korea. So there was a 3-year gap between his most recent fight, and which was Kyle Nelson, and the fight before that, Charles Jourdain. So Woo Choi in his last 4 fights is winless. He's 0-3-1 in his last 4 fights. But if you look at those fights, one was against Cub Swanson back in 2016. That was an absolute war. He got finished in the second round by Jeremy Stevens almost 2 years later. A year and a bit later. And then in December 2019, he got finished by Charles Jourdain, who at the time was looking pretty good, looking pretty dangerous as well. But then that was from December 2019 to February 2023 from the Jourdain and Nelson fight. And even though he was 3 years removed from the octagon, he came in so calm, so collected, and he looked like he didn't have any ring rust whatsoever. That ended up being a draw because of a headbutt in the third round of that fight. But he was dominating Nelson in that fight. He was chewing up his leg as well, and I think that's going to be a big factor in this fight against Algeo as well, because Algeo has that karate, he's that fun karate stance, the wide base, the bounciness, and he has a hands low style as well, which honestly isn't very good for him because he is extremely hittable. If you look at his fights, he gets hit a ton. So he does rely on his chin a lot in his fights. And a big reason why I decided to go with Choi in this matchup is because Choi has the power to knock out his opponents on the feet. I think he has 11 career KOs, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 11 career KOs. He has the power to hurt people. He has the power to put people away. And Algeo is the kind of fighter. He has that kind of style that he's just really hittable. You see him get beat up in a lot of his fights. He got standing TKO'd against Kyle Nelson in his last fight. Yes, it probably was an early stoppage, but I don't think anything would have changed in that match. Nelson was destroying him. Now, before that, Alexander Hernandez, he got a unanimous decision win against Alexander Hernandez. The fight before that, TJ Brown, he won in the second round, but TJ Brown was piecing up Algeo in that fight. He was destroying Algeo on the feet. You guys should rewatch that. Algeo is too hittable for my liking. Woo Choi is very methodical. He doesn't put himself in the fire like Algeo does, and I think he's going to be able to work the legs of Algeo, eliminate that movement, eliminate that bounciness in his step or in his stance, whatever you want to say. And I think that's going to be a big thing in this fight for Choi. I think he should chop away at that leg, remove the movement away from Algeo, and just strike with him. Maybe you can work in that wrestling as well, but Algeo is competent. He is a competent grappler and can maybe snag up a submission against Choi if he decides to go for those wrestling exchanges. But I do think Woo Choi gets this done. Let's move on to the next fight. We got a flyweight bout, an exciting one in my opinion. Cody Durden going up against Bruno Silva, and here's yet again another fight that I originally had one fighter and then did a little bit of tape study and decided to go with the other one. So I was going to pick Cody Durden in this matchup. I'm a big fan of Cody because he's an absolute dog. He's got that forward non-stop pressure, and he's a grinder. He'll come in and he'll do what is necessary to get his hand raised at the end of his fight. And that's what you want when you're looking at fighters to pick as a winner in their fights. He typically wants to apply that wrestling pressure, and he will continuously do it. If he gets you to the mat and you get back up, he'll throw you back down and just wear you out in that way. But he's going up against somebody like Bruno Silva who is very dangerous, and he is a very good overall fighter. He's got a good skill set. He can take you down. He can beat you up on the mat, control you there as well, and he's got power. He's finding power lately, and even though he's coming off of a 3-fight finish streak, which is impressive, okay, it's all KOs as well. Actually, sorry, 2 KOs, 1 submission that led from a big shot. It's not against the best competition. Durden has definitely fought the better competition in his career in the UFC, but 3 finishes in a row has to give you some sort of confidence. I'm sure Bruno Silva is going to be able to land on Cody Durden. There's a few things I want to mention as well. So, Bruno Silva, 3-fight finish streak. JP Buys knocked him out in the second round. Nothing crazy. Victor Rodriguez knocked him out in a minute. Lower level comp, those two, but that Tyson Nam win back in March last year, very good win. Second round rear naked choke, and it came from a front kick a teep kick up the middle that landed on Nam that put him on his ass, and eventually Silva worked in to get that rear naked choke. Cody Durden has, like I said, fought the better competition, and typically he struggles when he can't get his opponents down to the mat. When he can, it's a different story. He will continuously get those takedowns, but a problem he has is controlling his opponents when he gets there. So if he does end up getting a takedown on Bruno Silva, I think the strength of Silva is going to play in Silva's favor. I think he'll be able to get back to his feet. Silva will be the better striker. I think he lands the better shots as well. And one thing that does concern me on the Durden side is, even though he's never been KO'd, his chin, he has been getting hurt in his fights, especially more recently against Tagir Ulanbekov. Tagir Ulanbekov has never knocked out anybody in his entire career. He's fought 17 times and he's never knocked out anybody. So the fact that he landed a strike, like a punch, on Durden and dropped Durden in that fight, he was credited for a knockdown, that is concerning. Because Bruno Silva has real power, and if he can connect, I think he can knock out Durden. I honestly do. I believe that. As much of a dog as Durden is, and I love picking him in certain spots because of that grittiness, I think Bruno Silva is just going to land the better shots. I think he's going to be too physically imposing for Durden, and like I said, Durden just doesn't have enough control on the mat to kind of sway that decision. I think Silva will be able to work back to his feet, and 100% will have the better moments on the feet. So I will be picking Bruno Silva here, and I'll go as far as even saying that he'll get the KO over Durden. He's got that much power. Let's go with Bruno Silva. I'm going to continue on this card. Are we at the main card yet? Oh my God, we're already 2 fights in. Kurt Holobaugh going up against Kanan Kruschewsky. I am going to go with Kruschewsky here. I don't think Holobaugh's that good. He got exposed against Ogden terribly. Now, he did have that win in the finale against, against Austin Hubbard. I picked Holobaugh to get it done against Hubbard that night, I believe. Let me just double check. Yep. I didn't think he was going to get a submission, but I thought he was going to get it done. Regardless, I'm not ready to give up on Kanan just yet because he had a good performance on the Contender Series. I was impressed by that performance. And then he came in and fought Elves Brenner in his UFC debut. And I don't care who you are in the lightweight division in the UFC. Brenner is going to give you a tough scrap. And Kruschewsky had to do it in his UFC debut. So now that he's got the debut out of the way, I think this is a perfect bounce-back fight for him. I think he's just the better fighter anywhere this goes. I think he has a Muay Thai black belt or something like that. And he's got like 9 submission victories in his career. So I know he still has slick jiu-jitsu and slick grappling as well. But at this current point of Holobaugh's career, I think Kanan is the way better fighter. I don't think there's going to be much of a breakdown here. I'm not ready to jump ship on Kruschewsky just yet. I think he's going to be better anywhere the fight goes. He has the threat on the feet. He's got the threat in the grappling as well. So I will take Kruschewsky in this fight. I think Holobaugh's on his way out. Let's continue moving on to the fight. We got the featured fight of the night. Steve Garcia going up against Woo Choi. Now this fight, I am going to pick Steve Garcia, but what it ultimately is the battle of the chins. Whoever's chin can hold up in this fight will win because both of these guys come in with ill intentions to knock out their opponents. Steve Garcia, I've been sleeping on way too long. The guy continues to walk into the octagon and continues to knock out his opponents. He doesn't look like it when you look at him, but he's got insane power. Like, the guy's knocking out people. Yeah, so let's just look at his previous opponents. And because I haven't really been high on Garcia, like, at all. He comes in, knocks out Charlie Tavares. Okay, loses to Luis Pena. Okay, knocks out Tavares. Everybody knocks out him. Gets knocked out by Mahashate. And I don't care what anybody says. Mahashate is still young, but he is a good fighter. He's got power. Comes in against Chase Hooper. Knocks out Chase Hooper in a minute and a half. And that win is aging extremely well, considering what Hooper's been up to lately. Knocks out TKOs Nurdenbeke with a body shot. But he did go through adversity in that fight. I think he got dropped in the first round. Bounced back. Melquizael Costa fight. Melquizael Costa held on to Steve Garcia's back for probably 4 minutes in that fight in that first round. And what did he do? He came into that second round, guns blazing, and knocked out Melquizael Costa. the fact that he doesn't let certain things, like he's one of those guys that won't give up on himself. He won't let the previous moments of the rounds and the fights deter him from doing what he wants to do, and that's knocking out his opponent. Woo Choi, another banger. He wants to come in and knock out his opponent, but he doesn't have the chin. Steve Garcia has also been touched and been knocked down in his fights as well. So ultimately, this is going to come down to who lands first or whose chin lasts longer. That's just what it is. I'm going to go with Steve Garcia. I've been sleeping on him way too long. I think he put Woo Choi away. And he gets his hand raised. Steve Garcia by KO. Let's move on to the co-main event of the evening. We got Brad Tavares going up against Jun Young Park. Now, I've been a Jun Young Park hater. I never had him up here. I didn't really hold him in high regard whatsoever. I've picked against him in multiple of his fights, whatever, and he's proved me wrong almost every time. I think I had... Okay, so going through his fights, I picked Gregory Rodriguez to beat him. And even though he did have Rodriguez hurt in that fight as well, that has to be mentioned. Eric Anders, I don't remember who I picked in that fight. Joseph Holmes, I actually picked Joseph Holmes very stupidly because Holmes is awful. Dennis Tululin fight, I might have picked Tululin in that one just because of how dangerous Tululin is. But this is the Iron Turtle. That's his nickname, and it is for a reason. The guy is durable as hell. And I had Andre Muniz. I picked him against Jun Young Park in his last fight. That ended up going my way, but it was a split. So not the... could have gone either way. Regardless, going up against Brad Tavares, and in this current stage of Tavares' career, not that he's ever been too dangerous of a fighter, but he's content with kind of just cruising the 15 minutes. He's not going to come in and try to finish his opponents, and we talked about this earlier. You're going to want to go with the person that has the urgency to get his opponents out of there and not leave it up to the judges. Brad Tavares is not that kind of a fighter. He's okay with hanging in there for the 15 minutes and just kind of going through the motions. Jun Young Park is a little bit different. Even though he does have multiple decision fights in his career, he still actively looks to finish his opponents, and he finds ways to win. That's what I like about Jun Young Park. He's very durable as well. Not that Tavares is really dangerous in any aspect of the game, but I think Jun Young Park can grind up against the cage. I think he can wear down Tavares, even though Tavares has good cardio. But I think he's just going to be the better fighter. I think he has more power than Tavares. And this is one of those fights that I was kind of on the fence about as well. I did want to pick Tavares, especially as an underdog here, but I will go with Park. He just finds ways to win. He finds ways to get it done. I can count on him to actively be searching for a finish throughout this fight, whereas Tavares is going to just hope to make it through the 15 minutes and hope he gets his hand raised. He's okay with leaving it to the judges, while Park isn't. He's going to come in and fight for our dollar. He's going to come in, try to finish Tavares, and he's durable as hell. I'm going to go with Jun Young Park to get it done here. Let's move on to the main event of the evening. We got Amanda Lemos going up against Virna Jandiroba. Now, this fight, it's a classic striker versus grappler matchup. And I've been on the fence about this fight because who do I trust here? Do I trust Lemos, who I just saw get absolutely dumpstered by Weili Zhang? Was that fight before or after Mackenzie Dern? No, she fought Mackenzie Dern after that. Anyway, she fought for the belt. Fought Zhang in one of the most dominant championship performances I've ever witnessed in my life. Zhang destroyed Lemos over 25 minutes. And the only positive thing you can take out of that is that she did not give up. She did not... she didn't pack it in. She got dominated for 25 minutes and hung in there. That's the only positive you can take. She got absolutely destroyed. Anyway, I watched that happen to her. So what would be the difference can I see Virna Jandiroba doing the same thing? Maybe, but maybe not. She went in against somebody like Mackenzie Dern, who has Virna and Dern kind of have that same style, but I will say that Jandiroba has better takedowns. She's got better wrestling than Dern does. Maybe the jiu-jitsu is comparable, but I think that it's just, I don't know. It just depends on who you trust. Are you going to trust? I know Lemos is going to be miles ahead on the feet, but how long is this fight going to take place on the feet? That's the issue. But one thing to keep in mind is this is Jandiroba's first main event. It's her first 5-round fight as well. So there's going to be added pressure for her to do well. And is she going to be able to do it over 25 minutes? So last week, if you guys watched my video, Namajunas and Cortez, that breakdown, I named all the things that are going against Cortez, but I still ended up going with Cortez like an idiot. She got destroyed over the first 4 rounds. I'll give her the last round, but she got destroyed, okay? And I named off all the things that were playing against her. So I'm going to try to stop. I'm going to start listening to those things. And in this matchup, I think there's more things going against Jandiroba than there is going up against Lemos. Reason being is Lemos has been in main event spots before. She's fought for a belt already. All right, so that experience is going to help her. She's fought 5 rounds before. I think we already mentioned this. And she is going to be by far the better striker. By far. Now, on the Jandiroba side, like we already mentioned, this is her first main event, and it's her first 5-round fight. We've seen her slow down and kind of gas in 3-round fights. So how is she going to be able to? How is she going to look in that 4th and 5th round? Is it even going to get there? Because is she going to be able to take down Lemos and submit her? That's also something to keep in mind. Now, looking at Lemos, she's only been submitted once, and it was by a standing arm triangle by Jessica Andrade. That fight pissed me off because I think I had Lemos there, but that was all power based, and we know Andrade is borderline. All right, but that's the only time she's been submitted. So is Jandiroba going to be able to take her down and just submit her like that? I'm sure Jandiroba will find success wrestling and controlling Lemos on the mat. She's done it in basically all of her fights. She's not 20-3 for no reason. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is, will that be enough? Because we know Lemos is going to inflict more of the damage. And that's she's just going to have that power. She's going to be way better on the feet. So early on, I think Jandiroba gets a hold of Lemos and kind of wears her down, wrestles her a little bit, gets some control. But as the fight continues, I think it plays more and more into Lemos' favor, and I will be picking Amanda Lemos to get this done. Now, age, you guys are going to say Lemos is 37. Yeah, Jandiroba's 36. I always thought Jandiroba was a little bit on the younger side, but she isn't. So age is not a factor in this main event. I'm going to take Lemos to land the more inflicting damage, and eventually, I think Jandiroba will fade. I think she won't be able to keep up her usual fighting pace over 25 minutes. And I think Lemos gets a late TKO victory against Jandiroba this weekend at UFC Vegas 94. Now, before we go, let's backtrack and talk about all the picks once again. Or not talk about, just what we picked. So, Muhammad Usman, Luana Carolina, Trey Ogden, Deone Barbosa, oops, I skipped one. Cody Gibson. Oops. Jung Young Lee. Woo Choi. Bruno Silva. Kanan Kruschewsky. Steve Garcia. Jun Young Park, and Amanda Lemos. Those are going to be all of my picks for UFC Vegas 94. Now, you guys are seeing this on Friday. I'm recording this late Thursday night. So by the time you're seeing this, weigh-ins may or may not have been finished, so we will see how weigh-ins go. Typically, I don't really release a video afterwards because there's nothing really that changes my opinion typically, but we'll see how that goes. Regardless, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit that like button, comment down below with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more UFC content. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks again for watching.